Okay, thank you for our first two presenters. I'm Wayne Arnold, and I am third, and I will self-introduce myself. Let's make sure this is working. Okay, great. Let me get my time going. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm going to be telling you three personal stories. These are not directly related to Henry Miller in Japan, but I think you will find them to be quite amazing. They are, in my opinion, kind of one of those things. I just want to, let's see. I want to give a very brief overview of what I'm doing in Japan and why I'm researching Henry Miller in Japan. And when I was in the UCLA archives during my PhD research, I came across a lot of letters from Henry Miller, from Japanese people to Henry Miller. And that kind of got me curious. And then in 2013, I moved to Japan, but I didn't really have a clear research focus. And it wasn't until I contacted Honda Sensei, which some of you may know his name, that I and he's the head of the Henry Miller Society of Japan, and it was through him that things just started happening to me while I was in Japan. And so today I'm going to talk about three particular stories about Japan. Now, story number one I'm going to call friendship. And one of the things that you're going to notice in these stories is that all three of my stories that I have are connected to Japanese Buddhist religion indirectly, because that is one of my hobbies. And what I would like to do here is I want to introduce my very good friend, John Schultz. He is a professor at Kansai Gaidai University, and when I first moved to Japan, I taught at Kansai Gaidai for 1 year, and we met, and we have been buddies for the last 11 years, doing all sorts of crazy shenanigans. Our hobbies are basically hiking and camping and wild camping and pilgrimage. And this is the island of Shikoku. And I'll come back to this, so keep this in mind. But on Shikoku, this is the fourth largest island in Japan. And there's a pilgrimage that goes around this that hits 88 temples. It's 900 miles, or 1,400 kilometers. And John and I have done this twice, or thereabouts, and whatnot. But I want to mention this because one of our other activities is kayaking. And so one day, we were in Shikoku, and we were on a kayaking trip. And we had our friend Zoe, who's sitting up here in the front. Just by chance, someone took this photo of us on this trip. And we had rented not a cottage, but a house up on a mountainside. And you had to walk about half an hour to get to this cabin. And so Zoe was like, okay, Wayne, let's kill some time here. Tell me some of your stories about Henry Miller. And I was like, all right, great. I've just had this amazing interview. And the week before, I had interviewed a man that was present at Henry Miller's wedding to Hoki Tokuda in Los Angeles. And this interview was very interesting. And I just reviewed the notes this morning, and I now realize why I was so excited to talk about this, because it was, let's just call it a juicy interview. And I was talking about this guy and going on about how he knew Hoki and how he knew Henry, and the wedding was at their house and things like that. And the man's name, and so this is actually a photo of the wedding day, and here's Hoki, and here's Henry, and they're playing ping pong. And this is Puko, which is one of Hoki's friends. This is Joe Gray and an unknown woman. And this man right here is named Lee Siegel, and this is his brother, I believe, Bob. And I had just interviewed Lee Siegel, and so I was pretty excited because he's in this photo. And this is Lee Siegel in the recent years. He grew up. Some of you might know his novel. It was fairly famous, Love in a Dead Language. And Lee Siegel is a professor of religious studies at the University of Hawaii. So remember, I'm talking about this story as we're hiking up to this cabin on Shikoku. My buddy John is there. I'm telling Zoe. John, who's in the front, he turns around and he says, "Who are you talking about?" And I said, "Oh, this guy, Lee Siegel, that I just interviewed, about Henry. He was at the wedding." And John goes, "Do you mean Lee Siegel from the University of Hawaii?" And I was shocked because I had not mentioned the University of Hawaii. But here is my good friend, hiking buddy and things like that, and he goes, "I know Lee Siegel. Lee Siegel was my graduate teacher at the University of Hawaii." And there we are, and it was just like this moment, like my best friend and Henry Miller, and this is pictures in Japanese publications, and there's Lee Siegel, and there's Lee Siegel, and there is a much older Lee Siegel pouring my good buddy John a beer. And so it was just one of those moments where I was like, wow, okay, that's wild. So I gotta move fast here because I got some good stories. Number 2, I'm gonna call this luck or chance, whatever you want to do. In Hokkaido, or excuse me, in Kyoto, if any of you have been ever to Kyoto, there's a holy mountain on the east side of Kyoto. It's called Hieizan, or Mount Hiei. I call it the second most holy mountain temple complex in Japan. And if you want some controversy in my presentation, you can debate about that if you know anything about Buddhism in Japan. Anyway, here's Kyoto, an old map, and down through the river, you got Kyoto Station, and there's this complex up here on the mountains. There's 2 ways to get up there, or you can take a bus, but the most common way is ropeway. The other way is to hike, which is a lot of fun, but it's a 3-hour hike. And I was with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and it was January 2nd of some year, some in the 2010s. I think it's 17, maybe. So we go up to Hieizan because my girlfriend, Seiko, let's just call her Seiko, knew my interest in Japanese Buddhist architecture, even though I'm not a Buddhist. And you can get up there, and it's a very large complex on top of this mountain. Well, it's January 2nd, and we have to get back to Fukuoka, which is way down in the south. We have to get to Kyoto Station. We have a reserved ticket for 7 o'clock. It's 4:05, I'll never forget. We were standing about here. Now, the ropeway is somewhere down here by the floor, and I plug into Google Maps how to get back to Kyoto Station. And Google Maps tells me that I'll be there at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. And I said, okay, something's wrong with the phone here. This is not working. No, try it again. Get me back to Kyoto Station and whatnot. And still, 8 a.m. It's like, well, something's wrong here. And I went and looked, and it turns out because it's the winter time, they shut the ropeway early. It's 4:05. The ropeway ends at 4. So we are here, and we start to say, okay, there's a bus stop here. We need to get over to the bus stop. That will take us down to Kyoto Station. And as we are trying to get over this road here, we hear the bus start, the doors close, and the bus drives off. And we're like, certainly that's not the last one. But we get over to the bus stop, it's the last one. So we've got to get down to Kyoto Station. There's no more ropeway, there's no more bus, and there's one other route that would put us in Kyoto 3 or 4 minutes before our train. Almost impossible. So Seiko looks at me and she goes, "We got to hitchhike." And I was like, this is Japan. Hitchhiking, you don't really do hitchhiking. And I looked at her and I said, "You've never been hitchhiking." And she looks at me and she goes, "Yeah, but you have." And I was like, oh, God. So fortunately, the situation is over here. On top of Hieizan, it's the top of a mountain. So the road goes one way, the road goes the other way. So we come over here and we stand, and Seiko is wearing a bright red jacket, kind of a Christmassy, New Year's-y thing. And I kid you not, she starts doing jumping jacks in front of the cars that are coming out of this parking lot. Oops. And I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm trying to get cars to stop." And I was like, well, be a little strategic. I mean, literally, like, she's stopping cars or trying to stop cars that have 4 seats and there's 4 people in it. Like, this logic's not going to work. Anyway, finally, after about 10 minutes, a car stops, and there's a little old lady that's driving the car. She says, Seiko explains the situation. The woman was like, okay, get into the car. Now we start to drive down the mountain. And the woman is very curious about me because, what am I doing up on top of this mountain on January 2nd? My Japanese was not very good, so everything that happens over the course of the next 2 minutes of this story is all in Japanese with my with Seiko translating. And the woman says, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I work at the University of Kitakyushu." Her very next question is strange for a Japanese person to ask, and it was, "What do you research?" Well, let me tell you, I research Henry Miller and Japan. So I'm all excited, and she goes, "I know Henry Miller." And at this point in time, I'm still kind of new to Japan. And so meeting a Japanese person that knows Henry Miller or heard of Henry Miller, I was like, wow, that's cool. She goes, "Yeah, I wrote a book. I did some research on the Japanese author Abe Kobo. And this is Abe Kobo. And the woman wrote a study on Abe Kobo. And Abe Kobo is easily one of the greatest 20th century writers of Japan. One that I really like is The Woman in the Dunes. This is him with Mishima Yukio, who is famous for the seppuku and beheading in 1970. They are literally in a interview here talking about Henry Miller. And here's a letter that I found that mentions Abe and his interest in Miller. So we're driving down this mountain, and this woman is talking about Abe Kobo. And I ask her, I said, "What is your name?" And she goes, very quickly, she goes, "Nariabe." And Japanese people tend to give you just their family name. And I was like, "Nariabe, that's a weird name." And never heard of that one before. And we're driving down, and conversation's going on, and finally we're getting close to Kyoto, and my Seiko nudges me, and she goes, "I think this woman is Abe Kobo's daughter." And I was like, "What are the chances? No way." Anyway, we get down to one of the subway stations. This woman's dropping us off, and I say to her, "One more time, can I have your name again?" And she goes, "Nariabe." Okay, we get out of the car, the woman drives off, and we get it quick on Google and type in Abe Kobo's family, and it turns out that Abe Kobo has one child, and her name, Nariabe. So what's amazing about this is I was on one of the holiest mountains in Japan, lose transportation, have to hitchhike, which again is super rare, and I get picked up by the daughter of one of the most famous Japanese writers of the 20th century, and she knows Henry Miller, and she knows Abe Kobo, and the connection there was just one of those things that kind of just blew my mind, that he only had one child, and that was Nariabe. Now, this story I'm just going to call the miraculous. If those first two were not enough, this one is really mind-blowing. I started our session with my buddy John and the Shikoku Henro here, but there's a smaller pilgrimage over here on an island called Shodoshima, and this one will take about a week. Now, because I'm nerdy like this, I'm part of the Shodoshima Facebook page, and one day a Japanese man put on a request he wanted to interview people who had done this pilgrimage, and he was working on his MBA and wanted to get, some interviews. So I said, okay, I'm a researcher, I've done this pilgrimage. Sure, I'll interview with you. He says, "Oh, I see that you're down in Fukuoka." So I live down in Fukuoka, which is way down here. Shikoku's here and Shodoshima's here. And he goes, "Oh, in Fukuoka, there's another pilgrimage I want to check out. It's called the Sasaguri pilgrimage." And he says, "I'll come down there and I want to see this pilgrimage and maybe we can meet in person." I said, "That's a great idea." So this guy, his name is Kenny. He comes down, and we drive around in my little truck. I said, "I'll come over there," and I take him around to several temples. We spend 4 or 5 hours together, and then we're driving in my little truck here back over to Kitakyushu. And the whole day we've been talking about pilgrimage and Buddhism and, and things like that. And he looks at me and he goes, "So pilgrimage is not your area of research?" I said, "No, it's just my hobby." And he goes, "What's your area of research?" And I said, "Well, it's Henry Miller in Japan." Kenny goes, "I know Henry Miller." And I was like, really? Because Kenny is a little bit younger than the average Japanese person who would know Henry Miller at his peak in the 1960s. Kenny's probably about 50. And he goes, yeah, I read Henry Miller when I was in high school. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. How did you get Henry Miller's books in high school? They were published and everything. And he said, yeah, I had a friend whose father was a translator of Henry Miller. Now, let me stop my story for a little bit and go back in time to an article that I wrote several years ago and worked on. And it's called 4 Japanese in Search of Henry Miller. And in this article, I had 3 of the men that I was researching had corresponded with Miller. And 2 of those men, I had both sides of the conversation. But one man, I did not have both sides of the conversation. I had one side of his conversation because I had been to Yale and found all of Tobita Sensei's letters. And so I had that, and I knew that Miller was replying to this. So in 2019, 2020, I made a great effort to track down Tobita Sensei's letters. I knew that they probably still existed. He was an academic. He was part of the Henry Miller Society. No luck. I don't have time. So if you want to hear more about that, I've got some funny things that I tried to do to get these letters. Anyway, finally contacted the publisher. The publisher said they contacted the family, and basically I got told to bugger off. Like, no one wants to talk to you about Henry Miller in the Tobita family. Let's go back to Kenny. Kenny, what was the name of your friend that was in high school? And he goes, oh, her name was Tobita. Now, this is where the weird part comes in. This is the way my brain works. And I'm like, Tobita, I know that name. Tobita Sensei. Is he still alive? And we're driving in the truck, and he looks it up. Oh, no, Tobita Sensei died a long time ago. And I'm like, wow, yeah, but Tobita Sensei. He must be, I must have something about him. Anyway, we get back to Kitakyushu. We have our interview. And I said to Kenny, since you're interested in Henry Miller, it just so happens that I have an exhibit going on at my library about Henry Miller in Japan. This was, thanks to Roger, this was featured in one of the Nexus journals. And I said, Kenny, why don't you come by and I will show you my Henry Miller exhibit that's going on. He says, great. So the next day, we come over, or he comes over to my university. It was a Sunday. And I showed him the exhibit, and as we're going through, we're finding the name Tobita all over the place. In particular, this one here, which is up for raffle, this was published in 1967, and it was translated by Tobita Sensei. So we see this name and everything going on. And, Kenny goes back to Shikoku, where he was working on his MBA, and I go back home, and I'm just like, I get on my computer and I immediately pop up my own article about Tobita. And I'm like, I just start shaking. And I'm like, Tobita, the letters, Kenny, Tobita's daughter. So I quickly message Kenny and I said, listen, I remember why I know Tobita Sensei. I've been searching for his letters for years. Are you still friends with his daughter? And he basically says, he comes back and he's like, wow, this is amazing. I'll send her an email. I haven't contacted her in 10 years. Maybe she doesn't want to talk about this. And that's on November 15th, 2023. About 10 days go by, and he says, oh, she hasn't replied. And then around the end of the month, he finally sends me a message. I've heard back from her. There's letters. She has to go find them, but she's asked me to wait for a little while. So it's Christmas and New Year's and whatnot. And then finally, in February of 2024, I receive a package at my university that is full of original Henry Miller letters to Tobita Sensei. She gave them to me. She said, I have no idea whether these are useful. I had sent her a copy of the 4 Japanese in Search of Henry Miller. She said, these have been sitting here for years, decades, and you can have them. I hope they're useful for you. So I got about 40 original Henry Miller letters, because of just, I don't know. Anyway, all of this I want to say is, through my buddy John, our pilgrimage interests, through my search for Henry Miller in Japan, he is alive in Japan. There are people that remember him. There are letters hidden away in closets. And it's just been one of those things where you have to say, maybe I'm in the right place. Thank you.